I've been watching protests in this city for 30 years. I've been covering events in this city for 30 years. This was not a great day for democracy in Toronto. I saw things I'd never seen before. I saw things that frankly should not have happened. And people will come to their own conclusions about what they believe the state of democracy to be in Toronto and in Canada as a result of what happened. It was a sad, bloody day, I'll tell you that much.
Ontarians deserve answers. Ontarians deserve respect. Ontarians deserve, Speaker, a public inquiry to get to the bottom of what really happened in Toronto during the G20 summit. That is the bottom line. Otherwise, we risk setting a terrible, terrible precedent.
Let's go down the list. Laws were changed without public input. The public was misinformed about broadened police powers. Unconstitutional searches occurred across the city. Excessive force was used to disperse peaceful protesters. More than 1,000 people were arrested, held in an overcrowded detention center, and not allowed to call their family or more than 900 of them had not done anything wrong and were subsequently released without charge. Never have we witnessed before in this province such an outrageous and aggressive attack on fundamental freedoms and on basic and clear charter rights. We reverted to barbarism on June 26, June 27.
You know, Ontarians have paid very dearly over the years for this right to collectively gather and voice their opinions in freedom and without being accosted by law enforcement and police. They've had this right since the founding of our province, Speaker. It must be respected and it must be protected.
Don't be so grouchy. Get back! Move back!
Police in Quebec are being accused of using undercover agents to provoke violence outside the North American Leaders Summit in Montebello, Quebec earlier this week. Police are not commenting on the matter, but protest organizers say they have the video evidence to prove it. They claim officers acted as masked demonstrators who attempted to stir up the crowd at a legitimate protest and went way ahead or beyond their duty to keep the peace. CTV's David Aiken reports.
These protesters are not yelling at the lines of uniformed police officers. They're yelling at what they say are 3 undercover officers dressed up like them.
Come on, it's our line! Fuck her off to your line!
A protest leader is worried the 3 will get violent.
Put the rock down, man! Put the rock down!
The 3 refuse to identify themselves.
These 3 guys are cops, everybody!
Other protesters say they are provocateurs trying to start a riot.
They want us to be aggressive with them.
Trapped, the 3 push back and then try to bust the police line and are arrested.
Now, all of that happened on Monday. 2 days later, the Quebec police force refuses to comment on the incident. If anybody was arrested, no police agency is releasing their names or even confirming the arrests. Union officials say that's proof the 3 were police officers or their agents.
In a free and democratic society, people have the right to peacefully protest something they don't like.
Police routinely plant undercover officers at demonstrations, mostly to learn about routes protesters will use or to determine if there are any weapons. Information police say they need to ensure everyone's safety. This retired officer is skeptical the 3 were police officers. He says in his 25 years of policing protests, he's never seen undercover officers act in such a clumsy and dangerous manner.
I'm finding it very difficult to believe that any police commander for any police service would ever sanction that kind of an intelligence operation.
No. Put the rock down, man. Put the rock down. Hey. Put the rock down. This is our line. Get out of town. Cops out of town.
Communications, Energy and Paper Workers Union President Dave Coles was confronting these 3 masked men with rocks and bottles and accusing them of being police officers. You can see from this footage that they were intent on starting a riot. Watch as the gloved hand of one of these provocateurs hits a member of the riot squad in the face mask. Now watch as he changes hands with the rock and then bangs it into a riot shield. These masked men were attempting to violently disrupt an otherwise peaceful protest. They were breaking the law and violating the constitutionally guaranteed rights of the protesters.
They're trying to create a riot so that they can suck us all in to get beat up.
They're people off.
How do you know? I stopped him. Looked him in his eye and said, "You're a cop, aren't you?" And his eye just glazed right up. I tried to take his mask off. We took it off. We got pictures. They're provocateurs.
The action of these three masked men and the reaction of the riot squad was highly suspect, but ultimately it was the matching boots that gave the provocateurs away. That night I posted the footage on YouTube. For the next 4 days, it was a national and international news story. The Sûreté de Quebec denied any involvement, but on the fourth day, they finally admitted it was their officers.
As we confirmed yesterday, the three people in question were indeed Sûreté de Quebec police officers performing their duties.
These three guys are cops, everybody!
Busted. 3 Quebec provincial police officers, identities masked, one carrying a huge rock.
Hey, put the rock down!
Nabbed for infiltrating a peaceful protest at Montebello. The tip-off came from a union leader who noticed riot police standing by despite the obvious weapon. He accused the men of being undercover cops trying to provoke a riot and end the protest. The men were removed but never charged. After 2 days of questions, the Sûreté de Québec issued a news release late today confirming, yes, the men are police officers, but denying they were agents provocateurs, claiming they were sent in to identify and stop trouble. They say the police refused to throw stones, committed no crime, and were there to maintain order and security.
Wait a second. This is not a proper use of police resources, and we should be setting guidelines.
Activists have argued for years that police try to thwart their legal right to protest by trying to incite aggression so they can move in and take protesters away. They say they do it even when demonstrators gather in a designated area, as these mostly unionists were in Montebello. And they say politicians tacitly endorse it.
This is the face of it, where people can't even ask a question without having to face these kinds of goons.
The Supreme Court has ruled protesters have the right to be seen and heard. Tonight, both the Quebec and federal governments are facing calls to do more to police the police. Susan Bonner, CBC News, Ottawa.
It's being called Fortress Toronto. Several downtown blocks of Canada's largest and most populous city have been wrapped in more than 6 kilometers of zinc-coated fencing. Pounding the pavements in and around the 3-meter-tall barriers are thousands of officers who are keeping a watchful eye out for any potential threats as the leaders of the world's largest economies meet in Toronto for the G20 summit. The billion-dollar price tag for security alone is a controversy the government is struggling to contain.
So many things could have been done with that money. And am I upset? Yes, I'm upset.
Good afternoon. As of right now, if you need to be downtown, you need to be ready to identify yourself.
That's right, because police have some new powers. If you are within 5 meters of the outside of the security fence, you're going to be asked for ID. If you refuse, you can walk away and leave the area, but if you refuse and you stay, you could be arrested. CTV's Paul Bliss joins us now from Queen's Park. Paul, you were just down at police headquarters where Chief Blair was speaking with reporters, and the chief says these arrest powers are not new. They go back to perhaps 1939.
Yeah, the chief and I had a bit of an exchange going this morning because I was trying to get clarification from him. The act that grants the police these powers has been in effect for decades. However, these powers were only granted to police on June the 2nd. But the problem was it was done without police or the government notifying anybody. Essentially what happened is the chief went to the politicians, the Liberal government at Queen's Park, and said, I need special permission under an act that the government has as it's called, the Public Works Protection Act. He says, I want to be able to arrest anyone within 5 meters of the fence if they don't provide proper identification, if they don't allow me to do a search.
We know that securing Toronto city centre against all those anarchists and terrorists can get very boring, so we are here to remind you that everything is okay, that we are on your side. We are the love police, and our job is to lower fear and raise love.
We can ask them to leave, and as you all now know, we have the authority to ask them to leave the interior of the perimeter area and then 5 meters from that fence.
You're within 5 meters of this wall, so please turn off your video camera.
We can't film within 5 meters of the wall?
No, that's correct.
Okay.
Public Works Act states that, so please.
Because
we're show your identification to these officers.
Failure to identify yourself under the Public Works Act is going to end up in you guys being arrested.
They will not be arrested. They have a right to not identify themselves. Again, I would invite you to read the act because what you're saying is not true.
Right? So, who's got...
Is he being detained right now, or...?
He's just talking. Same thing that... I've asked you to stop filming, brother. Come on.
Let me clarify it for you. By all means, if someone comes to the fence and seeks entry, they will be asked to identify themselves. If they refuse, and they have a right to refuse, then they may leave. And they will leave without being arrested. If, on the other hand, they try to force their way in, they can be prevented from entering. That's a very different thing than what you have described.
Okay, so your friend didn't want to tell the police who he was, so he's been arrested for the time being, okay? All right, right now he's just been arrested.
So what's the arrest for?
For failing to identify himself.
On Tuesday, it emerged that special police powers that the media reported had been given to police for the duration of the summit, powers that the Globe and Mail suggested were unlimited, had in fact never been given. Although a temporary regulation was passed in secret on June 2nd, making the fenced-off security zone around the summit subject to the Ontario Public Works Protection Act, the so-called 5-meter zone that supposedly gave police the right to demand identification from anyone within 5 meters of the fence never existed. When asked on Tuesday if the 5-meter rule had been in effect, Toronto Police Chief Bill Blair said, quote, "No, but I was trying to keep the criminals out," end quote.
There's no official protest here today yet. The big one is tomorrow, but already we're seeing some evidence that police are using that new power that they have under the new regulation. Joining us now is Tara. She's you were here in the park earlier. What happened to you? Did police say something about this new rule?
Well, basically, we had just met in the middle of the park. We sat down to exchange some phone numbers, and within about 10 seconds, about 10 police officers had surrounded us, had basically asked us to open our bags so they could search them. My two friends said they did not consent to the search, and they enacted basically the new Public Works Act and said you have to basically open your bags and we have to be able to search them. So they searched our bags, also asked for our identification, and wrote down all of our identification as well as phone numbers.
When they mentioned this new Public Works Act, what did they say about it? Did they say, well, we can arrest you, or what?
They basically told us that it allowed them to open anything and search anything on public grounds. As to what public grounds means, they weren't really clear, but they said anything that was considered a public place, they could ask for identification and could search us. But there's no protesters in the park today, and so I was just kind of shocked that 10 police were surrounding us when we were writing down phone numbers.
Well, what about the fact that there is no fence here? I mean, a lot of the explanation was that if you're within 5 meters of the fence, you could be searched. There's no fence here.
I'm not sure why exactly we were searched, and in fact, there was no fence here. I haven't seen a fence for at least a couple kilometers, so I'm not quite sure why we're being searched here or why there is so much police presence, but we definitely, this act was invoked in us.
What this legislation does on its face is that it gives the police the authority to ask a citizen to identify themselves who happen to be in downtown Toronto, and they've designated a whole area of downtown Toronto. And to have a police with the authority to force you to identify yourself without any cause whatever is frightening. And then it goes on to give them authority to search the person without any cause.
Which means the whole right to privacy and right to probable cause is gone on the search. You just have to be within an area.
Within that approach, as it's called.
As we'll learn later, that's a pretty flexible thing. Just what is that area?
That's right. So they could designate, for example, the whole of downtown Toronto. as a public work, and then public protest would be prohibited.
I think it's kind of also extraordinary that it's not just police officers who can enforce this act. It's something they're calling guards. But the most important thing that then leads to is every person who gets appointed this way has the powers of a peace officer. They can turn almost anybody they want into a policeman.
That's right. And of course, we saw earlier this week or the previous week where there were a number of private security people that were going to come to Toronto to deal with the G20, and they weren't even licensed in Ontario, so that we've got people here that could be not licensed or they're quickly licensed. In other words, if people read that if they went downtown to protest, that some rent-a-cop guard could arrest them for whatever, neglecting to follow their instructions, then people may say, you know what, I don't need that. I think I'll stay home and so on. So the chilling effect is also crucial.
So the right of free assembly can be gone in a snap of cabinet's fingers.
In effect, a snap of cabinet's fingers behind closed doors.
This is pretty dramatic stuff, because the law was not only passed in secret, but it was kept secret. This is the stuff that Kafka wrote novels about. Secret laws that the citizenry isn't aware of are the hallmarks of tin pot dictatorships.
Okay guys, this is my undertaking to appear. There's me, and I got arrested on the 24th of June. Neglect to comply with the direction of a peace officer. Because I've broken the law, Public Works Act, brand new law, just to fuck over people like myself, Section 5.1. Yeah, so here I am outside the old courthouse in central Toronto. They held me for 20 hours following my arrest yesterday at 3 p.m. by Staff Sergeant Reynolds, badge number 3061, on the most bullshit charge of not providing my ID when asked to do so by an officer of the law. The guy didn't really give me a chance to give my ID. I tried to reason with him for a second. The next thing you know, the handcuffs are thrown on. I get taken into a holding cell, into a pen, where I was handcuffed with the cuffs behind my back for 4 hours, and they wouldn't loosen or release me from the cuffs. Even when I went to the bathroom, I still had to wear the handcuffs. I'm slightly traumatized by the whole event because they really treated me with absolute discourtesy and disrespect. I got taken after my 5 hours in the cuffs to the Toronto film studios, where they set up this massive warehouse where they're holding G20 Toronto protesters prisoner. And it was, as I keep saying, very traumatic. It's very, very scary when you're by yourself in that situation. I'm out, I'm safe. They didn't rape me, only mentally. So I'll see you all soon. Take care.
We right now are at Spadina and Queen, main intersection of Toronto, and it's just being taken over, sworn by some really radical anarchist activists right now. I've never seen Toronto like this before, so this is definitely a first for all of us here. So I think something's going to be happening soon, because I'm seeing a lot more people covering their faces, a lot more of the black blocks, covered head to toe in black. Everyone seems to be getting ready for something. The more radicals are kind of clustering over here.
violence.
Why do you
Not
think
what I
they were
came here for.
excuse the setup?
There is. Look, why is there a handful of cops there and a handful of cops there? There's fucking hordes of them. It's probably the police that are in there doing this.
Danny enough. That can't be all.
Oh fuck, they're going behind the alleyway.
My name is Joe. I'm a photojournalist. Yesterday I was following the protest against the G20 summit, and I started to follow the Black Bloc. As the end of the protest reached Queen and Spadina at around 3, somewhere between 75 and 100 Black Bloc members rallied. They left the main protest and started quickly back down Queen Street, heading east. On the way they encountered 2 police cars with police in them, which they attacked, broke windows. There were riot police at the intersection of each street that went south from Queen Street into the financial district, but they didn't engage the protesters. They just watched them go by, smashing windows and spray painting. From there, they turned south on Bay Street and started into the financial district. There were 3 police cars abandoned in the intersection at King and Bay. The Black Bloc started smashing the police cars and set one of them on fire. After around 15 minutes, they walked north on Yonge Street, smashing windows along the way. There were no police to be seen anywhere. The streets were full of people going, just kind of doing normal things. At 4:20, they reached College, where they smashed more windows on their way back to Queen's Park. They also smashed some windows at a police station. When they arrived back at Queen's Park, they had all huddled in a circle to remove their black clothing. And then after that, I just lost track of them. They kind of just blended into the crowd or disappeared from that area altogether. There were lots of other peaceful protesters in that area, since it is the designated protesting area. I found it really strange that we'd followed these guys 24 blocks over the course of an hour and a half, and there was no police presence, no police interference. We were in the financial area. We were in a highly commercial area, and there was people just going about their daily lives. And after seeing so many police on the street over the last week, it just seemed very strange to me that there was absolutely nobody along kind of one of the main anticipated protests of the summit.
A room filled with police officers stare at pulsating screens. Feeds from 85 cameras cover most of Toronto's downtown core. This was the command center for the G20 Integrated Security Unit. It may have been Toronto police on the streets, but the feds ran the show. At some point over the weekend, the operational commander watched the action unfold on the monitors in front of him and made two fateful decisions. The first was not to immediately move some of the thousands of available police officers into position to stop 100 or so people from breaking store windows. More importantly, not to quickly stop the trashing of several police cars. CSIS had decided there was no credible terrorism threat. The whole rationale for all the security was that a small segment of protesters, known for the day as the Black Bloc, would cause some property damage and might try to storm the security fence. Yet when the windows broke and the police cars burned for perhaps as long as an hour, there were no police in sight. Watch the CP24 coverage of police cars on fire Saturday night on Queen Street. The journalists ask over and over again, where are the police?
And Farah, tell me what police are doing right now.
I don't see any police here, Ann. That's the thing. I don't see any. I don't see even one unit around. This is just protesters and smoke coming out of this vehicle.
What happened to the two lines of several lines?
They dispersed down Peter Street. So again, there's no police officers here.
That's right, and that's curious. They were just there in 2 rows deep. Dave Woodford, OPP Sergeant, joining us on the phone. Dave, I don't know if you can see the pictures right now. Sergeant Woodford, another Toronto police car on fire. Police seem to be letting this happen. There were a lot of police in riot gear on Queen Street just a minute ago. Now they're gone. What is going on here?
Well, I don't know if it's protecting the vehicles or not. I think it's the security of the people and around the area. We have to make sure that when one of our vehicles, like we're seeing right now, are put up in flames, that we have to make sure that the security of the people around those vehicles, we're not going to save the vehicle. It's already on fire, so we have to make sure of that security.
Dave, looks like step in and ask, why are police not there right now?
Each officer has been given a specific detail where they're to be, and you can't let your guard go down on another location where there could be protests because there's maybe a vehicle on fire. We have to keep our grounds and keep make sure that all locations are kept safe.
This is what they're riding around in. They're not riding around in cop cars, which is interesting because there's cop cars all on fire. These guys are just standing around while that car is burning. Here's where all the cops are. There's a car around the corner that's burning. And all the guys.
Everybody's okay with this.
They're just hanging out. And
just chilling, drinking.
The people are standing around an exploding car.
You know what? They abandoned them.
They abandoned them on purpose.
The cops said no.
Superintendent McNeil told his hometown paper, the Cape Breton Post, quote, "We have the ability through our video feed to see everything that's going on. There are even helicopters and planes providing video feed. We can see them from the air. We can see them from the ground. If there's anyone trying to interfere, we would see that." Well, we know the police had infiltrated the Black Bloc. Now we know the cameras could see everywhere. So why couldn't the police defend their own vehicles? Was this part of a plan? Or a lack of available resources, as the police have said? Only a public inquiry can answer this question. Television images of police cars ablaze set the stage for mass arrests. And now joining us, Clayton Ruby, who's a renowned leading Canadian constitutional and criminal lawyer for decades in Canada. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
And I should add, a member of the Order of Canada. And thank you. Because what we've seen right now is, to all effective purposes, if they arrest 1,000 people or more and then don't charge them, they've eliminated the right to protest and free assembly, but it's never going to get tested in court because they just drop the charges. They can go fishing and throw the fish back and nothing ever comes of it.
Bear in mind that your idea of what is a norm of Toronto policing
is not based primarily on any value system the police hold that respects individual rights to protest. They seem to have none. It's based on limited budgets. And what we've seen here is a picture of the police state to come. What happens when you give the police unlimited budgets? All the men they want, all the toys they want, all the machinery they want, and the right to control huge swaths of the city. That's the police state that's going to come if we give them the money to do it.
Which apparently we did.
Which we did on this occasion, and which Mr. Harper wants to spend another $8 billion on prisons. That's the other end of this. So watch out for this police state. It really will come with money. And there's nothing to stop it, because those values of liberty and freedom and democracy are not cherished by the police departments.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the New World Order.
This is a point I think is very important to stress to those in uniform and to those in the dark suits in government who are serving this system while not actually instigating it, they're serving it. You have no power. I don't care if you're in the military. I don't care if you've got how many kind of stars on your uniform. I don't care what level of the police force you're in. I don't care if you're doing roadblocks. I don't care if you're pulling people off the street. I don't care what you're doing. You have no power. Your uniform has the power. Take your uniform off, okay? Put it in the wardrobe. Where's your power? Go and get another job without that uniform. Where's your power? You have no power. You are employed to animate that uniform, which is an extension of the state, and that's all you are, and therefore you are expendable. While you give your soul away, while you give your mind away, while you give your morals and decency away, advancing this fascist dictatorship, you will be okay with the fascists that you're serving. But your children and your grandchildren have to live in the world you are creating. And one day you're going to have to understand that, and I don't envy you that moment, because it's going to be horrific when it dawns upon you the world that you've actually created. The people in uniform and the dark suits that administer the system while not being the originators of it, they have to start breaking ranks, okay? Get some backbone, open your mind, look at what's going on, and get some freaking backbone before you administer and impose and enforce a world that will be grotesque for your children and grandchildren. In fact, not even that, for yourself.
After about a half an hour, the riot squad started to move into the protest zone, and another group of riot police came from behind Queen's Park and surrounded the protesters. They squeezed the protesters and bystanders as they pushed us back, hitting us with batons. They hit me in the back and my field producer in the hand, breaking his finger.
They broke my finger as I was trying to walk away.
Go on your knees. And they were also pepper spraying the protesters at that time. We knew we were going to try and follow the black bloc, so we wore helmets for protection. But we actually wound up needing them for protection from the police, more so.
was standing here exactly like this.
And they shot you with
this. I was like that.
And they shot you with a plastic bullet.
In the knee. They didn't believe you. Oh, look, it made a hole right through my shorts, too. Oh, fuck, dude, that is going to be bumping tomorrow.
There, to the best of my knowledge, has been no use of other use of force options like rubber bullets. I'm aware that that's been twittered by a number of people, but that, like much of the information being put out by these anarchists, is misinformation in order to mislead the public and the media.
With respect, Chief, I got an email from a political operative with a picture of one of these bullets on the street. So could it be that they're being used without your knowledge?
No, I would be advised if those devices were being used. I have been at headquarters all day, and I have been in contact with the incident commanders, the use of those devices. Now, I'm aware that those devices are deployed on the street, but I have not been advised that any such device has been fired at any individual.
So it was my daughter and I, we went to Queen's Park. It was around 6 o'clock, and we had sat down there with two other young men. We didn't know them, but we sat down with them, and we were talking, and we were there just sitting there, and we were only there for a couple of minutes when the police line moved up to us, and I heard one of the police said, move. So we were all trying to get up. I was sitting on the ground, and I was trying to get up, and the two young men were trying to help me, and then I lost my balance. I fell back down, and then the police were, I guess, wanted to get us pushing to get us going, and Dad and my daughter told them, leave him alone. He's an above the knee amputee. Let him take his time. And I was trying to get back up when one of the police shouted, "Get the four of them!" And then the next thing I know, they're just piled on top of me. The police pinned me down. One of them felt like they had a knee right on my left temple, and they were grinding my head right into the ground. My glasses came loose, and one of the police said, "You're resisting arrest," and I said, "I'm not resisting arrest." I couldn't move at all. I couldn't move like a centimeter. I was just pinned right to the ground, and they ripped my hands out from underneath me, forced them behind my, put them behind my back, and put on these tie wraps really hard. My glasses were laying on the ground, and they didn't seem to care. So I grabbed them in my mouth. I held the glasses in my mouth, and then one of the police, they ordered me to stand up or to walk, and I said I can't. And then one of them grabbed my prosthetic leg and ripped it off without any explanation. He ripped it off, and then he ordered me to walk, and I just looked at him. Obviously, I couldn't walk, and then he said, "Hop," and I couldn't hop, and I said, "I can't. I never hop. It's very painful." So that's when he said, one of them said, "You asked for it," and then two of them grabbed me underneath my arms and started dragging me away across the pavement, and my elbows were digging right into the pavement, and I was screaming at the time, and I was still trying to hang on to my glasses in my mouth, and so they dragged me, I don't know how far, but they dragged me a bit of a ways, and then they dropped me, and some other police came up, and they hoisted me into the air. They picked me right up, and it was sort of the same routine. They were hitting me. They were accusing me of resisting arrest. One of them, they were saying I was a spitter, that I had a weapon, and things like that. These were all untrue. I couldn't resist arrest. I couldn't do anything. But they dragged me to where they had their paddy vans or paddy wagons. They threw me on the ground. They did some more hitting and kicking me. So anyway, then they threw me into the van, and then I was taken to the detention center.
John Prine. John Prine's a constituent of mine. I know him. He's 57 years old. He works for Revenue Canada, for Pete's sakes. And he's an amputee. He lost his leg in a farming accident 17 years ago. He was sitting on the lawns at Queen's Park, which so many people had believed was sort of a safe zone. Not safe to commit crimes, but safe to be removed from any of the fray that was going on out there. And he was attacked by police officers, arrested, handcuffed, had his prosthesis torn off his leg.
I guess I'm just shocked, still shocked about the whole thing, and we need a public inquiry to clear the air on this.
I was protesting amongst other people, and I was swarmed by riot police who then threw me on the ground. One of the riot police had put their foot on my head to push my head down and informed me that I was resisting arrest when I wasn't. At this time, I had already said to them, "I'm not resisting arrest, please don't hurt me." There was a number of riot police that were taking my bag off of me. Someone kicked me, someone was holding my legs down. I had a few of them that were holding my arms, saying I was resisting arrest when I wasn't. And then eventually they got my hands behind my back because they asked me to. I put my hands behind my back, and they then put the zip ties on my hands, and which were really tight. I was losing circulation in my hands. At this point, one of the riot police officers had pulled my hair and pulled me up off the ground by my hair. At this point, a number of them had brought me over to the paddy wagon and threw me up against the paddy wagon. One of them said that I was getting ready to spit. I said, "No, I'm not getting ready to spit." They said, "Put your hand on her mouth." One riot officer said for me to stop moving my head. It was virtually impossible for me to stop moving my head because he had my hair and he had my head looking up at the sky. The other riot police officer then put his hand over my mouth, and I told him I wasn't going to spit. He told me to shut the fuck up. A number of they kept saying that to me. They kept telling me to shut the fuck up. They told me that I was provoking the people, and I was trying to tell them I wasn't. At this point now, while they have my head pulled back and a glove over my mouth, they then searched me. It was a male officer that rubbed both my breasts and went down and rubbed my private parts and rubbed my other parts and all the way down my legs. And after that, they said that they asked me if I wanted my bandana cut off my hair. And I said yes, please. And so at this point, they were telling me not to move because they were going to cut the bandana from around my neck. At this point, I have already urinated myself because I was so scared. And now I'm thinking they have a knife and they're going to have it around my neck and cut my bandana off my head. I'm sorry, it was very traumatizing and scary to experience that I have no rights and that I'm vulnerable as a woman, as a person.
Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Paul Jay, reporting from the G20 in Toronto. Now joining us is Steve Paikin. He's the host of TVO, used to be known as TV Ontario, which is the major public broadcaster in Ontario. The show is called The Agenda. Thanks for joining us.
Sure.
Now, you've been a current affairs broadcaster at TV Ontario for 18, 19 years. Mm-hmm. Have you seen anything like what you've witnessed this weekend in terms of the police?
I saw a crowd of people very organically just sort of gathering on Yonge Street. It was a very peaceful group of people, actually. Came together quite organically. There was no ringleader of it. No people with masks on. No people with signs. It just was people coming together.
So none of this black bloc look?
None of that. None of that. We had seen earlier in the day people with masks on their faces, trashing stores, torching police cars. This was the furthest thing from that. This was a group of people who had a very simple message, which is whether the G20 is here or whether they're not here, we ought to have the right to freely assemble and freely speak in this city. There's a history of that in the city of Toronto, capital city of Ontario. And that's the message they were trying to get out. So they wandered around the streets. There was, I don't know, a couple thousand of them walking down Yonge Street, moving onto some side streets, walking around for about an hour, would come in contact with a police line, would turn around and go somewhere else. This wasn't a group that was looking for a confrontation. In fact, there were a couple of moments during the course of it where they came to the big fence, which of course is well known as surrounding the whole G20 area. And I thought to myself, okay, here we go. There's 100 police on the other side of that fence, and some crazy person is going to try to scale that fence right now and get themselves on TV. Didn't happen. They got to the edge of the fence, they sang their songs, peaceful protest, that's what they kept saying. And then they turned around and went somewhere else. At one point in the evening, crowd is a little smaller right now. There's rain every now and then, so the crowd was thinning out a bit.
What size is the crowd at this point?
It's probably down to 500 or 600 at this point. They find themselves trapped at the base of one of the biggest skyscrapers in the city, the First Canadian Place. And there's a police line, police all clad in riot gear on one side, police line on the other side, and they got nowhere to go. So they sit down. Everybody's making a peace sign. They got nowhere to go, and they don't want any trouble. And all of a sudden, for no apparent reason that I could tell, because it certainly didn't appear as if the police were threatened, their safety certainly wasn't in jeopardy, there was no potential damage to property or other lives, the line started to move in. And
how many police?
I'm going to say probably, 50 on one side, 30 on another. And
shields, batons?
Oh yeah, and guns. I didn't know what they were firing, but at one point, they started firing on the crowd. Probably rubber bullets, maybe just, but it was definitely pop, 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 pop.
Now, Chief Blair of the Toronto Police Service has said there's been no firing of rubber bullets. You saw something being fired.
I asked, look at something, I felt it whiz right by me, and it was repeated. And I don't know what it was. I couldn't swear it was rubber bullets. I asked the police afterwards, because I had my media badge on. I asked the police afterwards, what were you, what's in those guns? And they said, smoke bombs and rubber bullets. So I'm assuming that's what they had.
And these are at 500 or 600 people sitting.
Yeah. They scattered, needless to say. The crowd goes off in any number of different directions, but then the police backed off, and somehow the crowd reconstituted itself after a while. Walked further south towards the G20 area, stopped on a side street called the Esplanade. The Esplanade's it's kind of a thin street. You've got a large hotel on one side, you've got a bank of restaurants on the other. Well, at that point, kind of history repeated. 50 cops, well, maybe more than that, maybe 75 cops on one side, taking their batons and smashing their shields and moving in, establishing a line. Same thing on the other side. The protesters aren't, I even hesitate to call them protesters, because they weren't really protesting. They were sort of gathered as a crowd, and once again, sat down on the road, making peace signs, most of the time not even chanting, just quiet.
So the police are doing this is usually the symbol of intimidation.
It works, believe me.
And it's usually when you're up against demonstrators that are being very aggressive.
Yeah, there was no aggressive demonstration here. It was just a peaceable protest. Anyway, the police lines start to move in further and further and further, and clearly they have everybody surrounded right now. And there's nowhere to go. And it then got quite bizarre, because one line came in and said, get out, get moving that way, leave. And the other side of police line kept coming in and saying, get out the other side, leave. And the protesters are saying, we don't know where to go. You're telling us to go this way, you're telling us to go this way. What do you want us to do? Where do we go?
Eventually, we got sort of corralled down at the Novotel in front of the Esplanade. Yeah. I never saw one bit of violence. In fact, they started arresting people while they were singing Give Peace a Chance.
And at that moment, I just thought it would only take one idiot protester or one idiot police officer to do something stupid before this got really dangerous. And it was very scary.
And then they were just closing in, so I decided this is getting a little too much. So I was on my way to leave. As I was walking by, the riot team attacked me and were like, you can't leave here. You chose to be here, we gave you a chance to leave. I'm like, I didn't hear a single chance to leave, and nor did anybody here. And this is my first day even living in this town, can I please leave? And they just pushed me out of the way and said, do you want to make me use this on all of you? And she had a tear gas gun in her hand. So I just continued and sat down with everybody. They just kept swarming in, and then just decided to announce, we're arresting all of you. You had the chance to leave. We gave you a chance. You're done. You're gone.
The riot cops sort of corralled us all in, blocked off both ends of the streets. They never said, leave now or you'll get arrested. There was actually no word. There was Calgary riot officers. I tried saying, can we go? Because it's starting to get a little bit scary, and that was our thing, was that we didn't want to get, I'm not a lawbreaker. What did they say? Smash, 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 stomp, stomp, stomp is what they said. No communication other than banging their shields. They got us into a semicircle. A couple came out of the keg, which was there, and they tried to leave, and they got too late. Bang on the shield, and the guy's like, too late for what?
A couple came out of the keg restaurant?
Yeah, the keg
just
restaurant.
Across the road from the hotel.
That guy ended up in my cage, yeah. There was a guy that was trying to show his ID. He lived in the condo there, and he got pepper balls shot at his feet, and he has to escape into the Novotel. You can catch him on the YouTube video. If you do Novotel, you'll see all these people running inside, and you'll see this guy who's just outraged because he lives in the condo, and he's trying to go home.
It's like, listen, I live here, what do you want me to do? I was like, back up, and shh, start shooting at me. Look, see? The bullets flying. See that? There you go. Yeah. What the fuck is this anyway? Pepper, that's fucking morons.
At that point, a couple of police officers came up to me and said, okay, you got to go. And I said, but I'm here doing my job. I'm with the media. Here's my G20 accreditation. And they said, well, you can stay and report, but we'll arrest you if you do. Or you can go, and we'll take you off site, and you can leave. So at that moment, I thought to myself, I'm not going to be able to do a lot of reporting sitting in a jail cell, so okay, I'll go. As I walked away, these two police officers escorting me away from this site, I see 5 feet away from me a reporter by the name of, I later found out his name, I didn't know it at the time, Jesse.
Is it Jesse Rosenfeld?
Jesse Rosenfeld.
We know him because he's done some work for us from the Middle East.
Okay. He's reporting apparently for The Guardian. He doesn't have a G20 ID badge, he has the Guardian ID badge. So the police officers say to him, one grabs him by one arm, the other grabs him by the other arm, picks him up, drags him over, says, we're going to take your badge, we're going to check and see if you are who you say you are, and wait right here. He had no choice to wait right there, they were holding on to him. Jesse wasn't rude and he wasn't belligerent, but he continued to press them. Why are you detaining me? Why won't you let me do my job? I'm here from The Guardian. It's a reputable newspaper. Why, he kept going like this. And they took the badge. One officer left, presumably to do the identity check. He continued to push the officers by asking them, why am I here? What are you doing? Why won't you let me do my job? He was completely immobilized. Jesse's like 5'5", 140 pounds. I mean, he's a scrawny little guy. A third police officer wearing T-shirts and shorts, not riot gear, walked over and just hauled back and gave him one right in the gut. And Jesse doubled over.
This is while he's being held by other policemen.
Jesse fell down face first onto the ground. Same officer then came, elbowed him right on the back. And he's obviously out of commission at that point, and I think screaming as well. The officer who was escorting me away at this point, I mean, we both saw it, looked at me and said, geez, that shouldn't have happened. Shouldn't have done that. And then I was kind of rushed away.
And at this point, we were definitely cornered, and it had been a while. Presumably, people would have left if the police had let us leave, but we were totally sealed off, and there was absolutely nowhere to go. And on a couple of occasions, they told us, leave, go home, which was very, very hypocritical because, yeah, we had absolutely nowhere to go. A lot of people, probably a lot more than half, collapsed into the entrance of the parking garage of the Novotel.